Old black man did a crossword in seconds. Then the journalist recognized his face. Thomas Tom E. Carter was never one to believe in fate. As a 28-year-old journalist for the Tribune-Post, he preferred leads, facts, and cold, hard logic. His latest assignment, however, demanded something more abstract, a human interest series titled Extraordinary Lives of Ordinary People. The idea came from his editor, an attempt to humanize a paper too often criticized for being cold and corporate. Tom wasn't thrilled, but he played along. After all, everyone loved a good story, especially one buried beneath wrinkles and time. It was a mild Tuesday morning when Tom first saw him. The city park was half empty, the breeze rustling through branches above as joggers passed and pigeons wandered. Tom had his coffee, a notepad under one arm, and no real plan, just an eye out for someone. Interesting. And then he noticed the old man. He sat alone on a worn wooden bench near the pond, hunched over a copy of the New York Times. His coat was frayed at the cuffs, shoes scuffed and solace peeling. His skin was dark, deep brown like aged leather, and his face was a map of wrinkles, a canvas aged by time and weather. A canvas that somehow felt familiar. Tom wouldn't have looked twice if not for what the man was doing. The Times was folded to the crossword page, the kind printed every Thursday, famously complex, devilishly difficult. Most readers couldn't finish it in a day. But the man was flying through it. He moved with grace, not hurried, but confident. Each square filled in neat block letters, no erasing, no hesitation. Within 2 minutes, Tom watched jaws slack as the man completed it. Flipping the page, he casually began a Sudoku puzzle printed on the opposite side. Tom blinked. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered to himself. The reporter in him stirred. This wasn't normal. This wasn't luck. He approached slowly, hesitating a few feet from the bench. "Excuse me, sir," Tom said carefully, not wanting to startle him. That was impressive. I've never seen anyone do that puzzle so fast. The old man didn't look up immediately. He simply offered a warm smile, as if he'd heard this before, and continued scribbling the final numbers of the SUDOKU. Tom waited. The silence stretched. Finally, the man looked up, eyes sharp behind a pair of scratched bifocals. There was a quiet humor in them, but also something else. Something distant, heavy. "I've had a lot of practice," the old man said simply. Voice deep and smooth like an old vinyl record. "Clearly," Tom chuckled nervously. "I'm Tom, by the way. I work for the Tribune. I'm doing a piece on people who have interesting stories. I think you might qualify." The man tilted his head slightly, as if measuring the young reporter. "Name's Harold," he said. "Mr. Harold will do." Tom smiled. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Harold. Do you come here often?" "Every Tuesday," Harold said. "Same bench. Same paper. Do you always finish the crossword in under 2 minutes?" A slight shrug. "Sometimes. Faster. Depends on the clues. Some editors are more creative than others." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You notice the editors? They each have a rhythm, a personality. You can tell by how they structure the puns. Will Shorts likes to mislead with pop culture. Brendan's more classical. Liz is playful." He spoke like a professor recalling favorite students. There was no arrogance in his tone, just precision. Certainty. "You must be a retired professor or something," Tom guessed, pulling out his notepad. "I'm retired, all right," Harold said, then looked away, his eyes trailing the surface of the pond. "But not a professor." Tom sensed the pause was intentional. A wall had just gone up, but not a rude one. A defensive one. "Mind if I sit?" "Free country," Harold said with a small smirk. Tom settled on the far end of the bench. He watched as Harold folded the paper, tucked it neatly into his worn leather bag, and leaned back. His posture was proud despite his age. There was dignity in every movement. "I don't want to pry," Tom began, "but that crossword, most people can't even finish it in an hour." "I'm not most people." "No, clearly not." A pause. "You remind me of someone," Tom said slowly, studying Harold's features. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but your face, it's familiar. Have we met before?" "Doubt it," Harold replied, but his voice was quieter now. There it was again, that strange flicker in his eyes, as if his soul had been somewhere vast and painful, like he was holding on to something unspoken. Tom didn't push. Not yet. Instead, they sat in companionable silence, the city murmuring around them. Harold eventually pulled a battered book from his bag. G. Del Escher Batch. Tom recognized it and began flipping through pages filled with complex annotations, formulas, and cryptic sketches. Tom glanced at his watch. He had another appointment in an hour, but something about Harold made him want to cancel it. "Would you be open to meeting again?" he asked. "Maybe talk some more? I think people would be fascinated by your story." Harold closed the book gently, his hand resting on the cover. His gaze didn't lift. "People only care about stories that make them feel good," he said, "not the ones that make them uncomfortable. I think you underestimate readers." Harold looked up again. "And I think you underestimate memory." Tom had no clever reply. He just nodded, standing up slowly. "I'll be back next Tuesday, same time," he said. "If you're here, maybe we'll talk some more." Harold didn't respond, but the hint of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Tom took that as a yes. As he walked away, a strange chill crept up Tom's spine, not from the breeze, but from the feeling that he'd just stepped into a story much bigger than he imagined. A story that someone had tried very hard to bury, and now a ghost with a crossword was offering him a map. Tom returned to the park 3 days later. Harold was already there, in his usual spot, coat neatly buttoned, hat tilted just so. The same folded New York Times rested in his lap, already completed. A fresh Sudoku now occupied his attention. Tom sat without asking. Harold didn't seem surprised. "You're back," he said. "I told you I would be." "Most people say that," Harold murmured, "but few mean it." Tom smiled. "I'm persistent. Comes with the job." Harold looked up, offered a nod of respect, and went back to scribbling numbers in the grid. Tom waited, resisting the urge to speak. After a few minutes, Harold put the pen down and turned to him. "You still want to hear a story?" he asked. "Only if you want to tell it." Harold studied him. Then he leaned back, fingers interlocked across his stomach. "I used to think intelligence was a shield," he said, "a fortress. That if you were smart enough, clever enough, they couldn't touch you. Turns out I was wrong, very wrong." Tom blinked. "You've been through something, haven't you?" Harold chuckled softly. "Haven't we all?" Over the next hour, their conversation took on a rhythm, measured, layered, revealing. Harold didn't speak like a retiree recounting vague memories. He spoke with precision, quoting obscure texts from memory, reciting full passages from Baldwin, Ellison, Bertrand Russell. He referenced Gigel's incompleteness theorem in casual conversation, then shifted seamlessly to jazz theory, then to African tribal history. It wasn't showy. It was natural. Tom was in awe. "Were you a teacher?" he asked finally. "No." "Researcher?" "No." "Scientist? Mathematician? Philosopher?" Harold only smiled, tapping his temple. "All up here. Life just didn't go the way I planned." Tom went home that evening with a strange mix of excitement and unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that Harold was someone important. There was a depth in his gaze, the kind that doesn't come from simply reading books. It came from living through something most people wouldn't survive. That night. Curiosity 1. Tom opened his laptop and typed, Harold Mathematician Black Man 1960s Genius TV Show. Nothing. He refined the search. Black Crossword Genius 1965 Television. Still nothing. It was odd. For someone of Harold's intellect, there should have been something. An academic record. An award. A paper. A mention. But the internet was silent, and that silence felt intentional. The next day, Tom returned with a recorder in his jacket pocket. He didn't use it, though. Something about Harold demanded trust, and Tom wasn't ready to betray that. Instead, he asked questions, carefully. What was your dream, Harold? Harold tilted his head. You mean before or after the world told me what I wasn't allowed to be? Both. Harold didn't answer immediately. Then he said, I wanted to solve the Riemann hypothesis by the time I was 20. Tom's jaw dropped. That's still one of the great unsolved problems in mathematics. I had ideas, Harold said quietly. But people didn't want a colored boy on the front page of Scientific American. The weight of those words settled between them. Did you ever publish anything? Harold laughed, dry and bitter. I tried. But rejection letters don't come with footnotes. Eventually, I stopped sending them. Tom hesitated. Can I ask ... what happened? Harold looked at him for a long time. Then, as if something had finally broken open, he said, You want a real story? Fine, I'll give you one. He took a breath. His voice dropped, grew slower, almost theatrical. In 1965, I was 17. I got invited to a national television show, The Great American Mind. It was called a live quiz show. They pitted students against professors. Gimmicky, but fun. They had chess challenges, memory tests, logic traps, math puzzles. I wasn't just good, I was spectacular. Tom leaned in. You were a guest? I was the champion. I beat 3 MIT professors in one episode. Scored perfect rounds. They didn't know what to do with me. He paused. Then, a producer pulled me aside backstage and asked where I learned all that. I said, Harlem Library. He looked ... disappointed. Not impressed. Disappointed. Tom clenched his jaw. Then what? They accused me of cheating. Sighed I had a hidden device. Security searched me. On live television. Tom felt his stomach twist. They claimed the questions were leaked, that I memorized answers. They cut my mic. Never aired the full episode. A week later, a different student was crowned the winner in a corrected rebroadcast. That's unbelievable. No, Harold said softly. It's entirely believable. Just not convenient. And after that, my scholarship to MIT vanished. No reason given. My mentor, a white professor at Columbia, stopped returning my calls. I tried to fight. It wrote letters, protests, nothing. My reputation was gone. Just like that. Tom stared, stunned. Harold looked down at his hands. They didn't just take away my future. They made sure no one would remember I existed. Tom didn't know what to say. His journalistic instincts were screaming. This was the story of the year, maybe the decade. But more than that, he felt something else. Shame, anger, and a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow. Later that night, after saying goodbye, Tom did something he hadn't told Harold about. He had taken a discreet photo of him earlier that afternoon, just one, from a respectful distance. The lighting was good. Harold had been smiling faintly, looking at the ducks. Tom uploaded the image into an AI-based facial recognition program used by his paper for investigative work. He entered a time range, 1960 to 1970. Black males. Age between 15 and 25 in the mid-60s. It took 3 hours to process. And then Appeared. Match confidence. 90.3% subject. Dr. Harold Elijah Brown, born 1948. Known as the Harlem Prodigy Achievements. First black. Finalist at International Mathematical Olympiad 1964. Guest on The Great American Mind 1965. Later disappeared from records. Tom stared at the screen. There were 3 photos of a younger Harold, one in a suit, holding a gold medal, one sitting at a chalkboard filled with equations, and one the last one showing him on a stage, confused, surrounded by security guards, a crowd watching. Tom leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. A genius, buried, erased. He whispered aloud, "Why did no one stop it?" Then came the next question, the one he couldn't ignore. What am I going to do about it? Tom barely slept that night. The facial recognition match replayed in his mind like a haunting song. Dr. Harold Elijah Brown, not just a prodigy, a pioneer, a name that should have been in textbooks, not buried in the forgotten corners of the past. By morning, he was at the city library, sifting through yellowed microfilm reels and brittle copies of the New York Herald, the Tribune, and Jet magazine. One article led to another, then a name, then a date, and slowly, a pattern began to form like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to put together. In 1964, Jet magazine published a glowing profile of a 16-year-old black math genius from Harlem, who stunned the world by winning gold at the International Mathematical Olympiad in Poland. He was the first African-American student to ever compete, let alone win on that stage. The headline read, "Einstein of Harlem, meet Harold E. Brown, the boy who sees numbers like poetry." Another article in the Tribune quoted a Columbia professor calling Harold the most promising mathematical mind I've ever encountered, regardless of color. Photos showed a smiling young man in a navy blue blazer holding a medal in one hand and a chalkboard pointer in the other. His posture was proud, his eyes radiant. Then came 1965. Tom's breath hitched when he found the article in the Times, dated April 3rd. Young contestant disqualified from TV quiz show after cheating allegations. Harold Brown, a teenage contestant who had astonished audiences by defeating 3 professors in a live broadcast, was removed from the set after producers claimed he had obtained questions in advance. Brown denies the allegations. An investigation is ongoing. The article was 2 paragraphs long. No follow-up, no updates, no retractions. A promising star, publicly humiliated and cast into darkness, without trial, without evidence. It was followed, weeks later, by a short column in a local Harlem paper. Brown family leaves city amid controversy. Sources say Dr. Elijah Brown and his wife have taken their son Harold out of state, citing threats and media harassment. Then, nothing. His name disappeared. Tom sat frozen in the library, fingers trembling over the keypad of the microfilm machine. The more he dug, the more grotesque the story became. Harold's mentor, Professor Langley, had written a single open letter, defending his students' integrity, only to be quietly forced into retirement the next semester. The episode of The Great American Mind that had featured Harold was never aired. In its place, a re-edit featuring a white finalist aired under the title Special Replay. The network offered no explanation. Tom slammed his laptop shut in. Frustration, rage pulsed beneath his skin. This wasn't an oversight. It was an execution. They didn't just humiliate Harold. They erased him, and now he sat in a public park decades later, solving crosswords as if none of it had happened. Tom couldn't let it go. Back at his apartment, he opened a blank document and began typing. Genius they buried. How America erased Harold Elijah Brown, he wrote late into the night. Words poured out in a blur of anger and clarity. He layered his piece with archival photos, copies of articles, quotes from Harold himself. He detailed the timeline from Olympiad champion to public disgrace. He explained how racial bias, institutional pressure, and media complicity crushed one of the most gifted minds of a generation. He wrote not just to expose injustice, but to correct it. When he finished, it was nearly dawn. The word count sat at 3,200. Polished, vetted, personal, powerful. He emailed it to his editor with the subject, urgent, a story that deserves to be remembered. Then he waited. Hours passed. Then came the reply from Susan G., editor-in-chief. Subject: Story on Harold Brown. Tom, I appreciate your passion on this piece. I really do. It's well written and clearly important to you. That said, I have concerns. The timeline is from over 60 years ago. It's not relevant to today's news cycle. Most of the sources are unverifiable. We can't run a story built on fragments and emotion. We have no confirmation that your Mr. Harold is definitely Dr. Harold Brown. Let's pivot to something more current, please. Best, Susan. Tom stared at the screen in disbelief. Not relevant? He stood, furious, pacing across his apartment. He had the records, the photos, the quotes, the facial recognition match. What more did they need? A video confession? He considered writing back a scathing reply. But then he stopped. Of course they wouldn't run it. They were the same machine that buried Harold in the first place. The same kind of institution that never cared to look deeper. If Harold had been white, wealthy, loud, the story would have never been lost. But because he was a quiet black boy from Harlem, gifted beyond comprehension, he was expendable. Tom's hands trembled as he opened the story. File again. No. He wouldn't let this end in silence. He didn't need the Tribune. He needed the truth. To live where it couldn't be erased. He would publish it himself. The next day, Tom returned to the park. Harold was there. Same coat. Same bench. This time, Tom didn't wait. I found it, he said quietly, sitting beside him. I found everything. Harold didn't look up. So it's all still there then, buried but not burned. Tom nodded. Why didn't you ever try to tell your story again? Harold gave a dry smile. I did. No one wanted to hear it. Especially not from an old man with no degrees and no address. You had a voice, Tom whispered, and they stole the microphone, Harold said. Twice. Tom pulled a folded copy of his article from his bag. Printed, annotated. He handed it to Harold. I wrote this for you. For all the people they forgot, but my editor won't publish it. Says it's not news anymore. Harold read the first few lines. His hands were steady, eyes unreadable. After a moment he said, You wrote this with fire. I can feel it. I want people to know who you are. Harold was silent for a long time. Then he looked out at the pond, at the children. Laughing nearby, the pigeons flapping near their feet. I used to come here, he said, because it was the one place they couldn't take away. I couldn't get back my scholarship. I couldn't get my name in the books. But here, with a pencil and a puzzle, I still mattered, even if no one knew it. Tom felt his throat tighten. You matter, Harold. Harold looked at him with quiet gratitude. And now, maybe they'll remember. Tom nodded. They will. I'll make sure of it. It started with a whisper. Tom returned to the park one bright Tuesday with a plan and a camera. He approached Harold just as he was unfolding his usual New York Times, a brand new crossword glinting in the sunlight. Tom held up his phone. I need to show the world what you can do, he said gently. Will you let me record? Harold gave him a long look as if measuring his intentions. Then, with the faintest nod, he said, Just don't ask me to smile for the camera. Tom chuckled. Wouldn't dream of it. He hit record. The video began with Harold seated on his usual bench, a pencil in one hand, the Times folded open. Tom framed the shot to catch the page clearly, his voice narrating quietly from behind the lens. "This is Mr. Harold. He's 83. Watch what he does with the hardest crossword in the country." Harold didn't hesitate. His pencil danced across the page like a musician across keys box after box filled in clean, confident strokes. There were no pauses. No second guesses. The timer on Tom's screen ticked. 1 minute and 49 seconds later, Harold set the pencil down. Tom cut the video right there. He uploaded it that evening to YouTube and TikTok under the headline, "This old man solved an impossible puzzle in seconds. Watch closely." He didn't mention Harold's name. He didn't talk about injustice. Not yet. He let the mystery speak first. By morning, the video had 12,000 views. By evening, it had 2.3 million. By the third day, it had exploded into a cultural phenomenon. Comments poured in. "No way this is real. Is he using AI? How's he that fast? That's freaky. This man is a living legend. Respect. Wait, doesn't he look like that math genius who disappeared in the 60s? Harold something?" The last comment caught fire. Users began sharing screenshots from old magazines. Someone posted a grainy photo from 1964 showing a young black teen accepting an award with the caption, "Harold Elijah Brown, the Harlem Prodigy." Another user stitched it side by side with Tom's video. The resemblance was uncanny. Same cheekbones, same wide, analytical eyes, the same left-handed grip on the pencil. Reddit lit up. Twitter exploded. TikTok replays surged. A hashtag was born. #Justice for Harold. Within days, the internet became a swarm of amateur detectives. They pulled archived documents, sourced microfilm, uncovered yearbook photos, and rediscovered long-buried articles. The story of Harold Brown, this Olympiad champion, the TV contestant, the genius erased, unfolded across feeds in real time. An old retired teacher from Harlem posted, "Harold was my student. He was brilliant. They destroyed him because he was smarter than the men in charge." A former network intern, now in his 70s, commented, "I saw what they did on that set. They made him out to be a cheater. He never was. We all knew it." A surprise twist came when a former producer of The Great American Mind, now living in Arizona, gave a recorded interview to a podcast. "The studio heads didn't like the optics," the man said. A black teenager humiliating Ivy League professors on national TV? That didn't sit right in 1965. They made me cut the episode. I was sick over it. I still am. Tom watched it all unfold with a surreal mix of satisfaction and disbelief. What the press had once buried, the people were unearthing. The internet had become the courtroom that history never offered Harold. Then came the call. It was from the Unity Hour, a nationally syndicated talk show hosted by Ava Lennox, a respected journalist known for sharp interviews and redemptive storytelling. "Mr. Carter," the producer said, "we'd like you and Mr. Harold to appear on this week's segment. We want to tell his story properly." Tom asked Harold. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, finally, Harold exhaled. "I'll speak. But not because I want applause. Only because silence was never my choice." They flew to New York on a Thursday morning. Tom sat beside Harold on the plane, watching him sketch math puzzles on a napkin like he was composing symphonies. The older man never once looked nervous. The studio was a whirlwind of lights, cables, makeup brushes, and coffee. Ava Lennox herself came backstage to greet Harold. "Mr. Brown," she said warmly, "it's an honor. I grew up hearing rumors about you. I never thought I'd get to meet the man behind the myth." "I was never a myth," Harold said quietly. "Just a secret." When the cameras rolled, the set fell silent. Ava introduced the segment. "Tonight, We meet a man whose mind once stunned the world until the world decided to look away. But now, after nearly 60 years of silence, the truth finally speaks. They played Tom's original video on screen. The audience clapped, some laughed in disbelief. Then they showed the side-by-side photos. 1964 Harold and present-day Harold. The audience gasped. Ava turned to him. Double quotes, Mr. Brown. Why did you never come forward after what happened to you? Harold leaned toward the mic. His voice was calm, but each word landed like thunder. I tried. I wrote letters. Knocked on doors. But back then, being black and brilliant wasn't a blessing, it was a threat. They didn't just call me a cheater. They made sure my name was never spoken again. They said I was too young to be that smart, too urban, too dangerous. The audience held its breath. They didn't break me, but they made sure no one else would ever hear me, until now. Tom watched the room. People were crying. Ava asked, "What would you say to those who silenced you?" Harold looked directly into the camera. I forgive them. Not because they deserve it, but because I've carried their poison long enough. It's not mine to hold anymore. The segment went viral before it even finished airing. Twitter overflowed with praise. Journalists, activists, and celebrities began demanding official recognition. Think pieces emerged. How many Harold Browns have we lost? And when genius meets racism, a national reckoning. Universities reached out. Lawmakers issued statements. Public pressure mounted. The truth was no longer hidden in margins. It was now inked on the front page. After the taping, Tom and Harold walked out into the city night. Neon lights flickered overhead. The air buzzed with the sounds of people moving, alive, unaware they were breathing in the aftermath of history being corrected. You did it, Tom said softly. No, Harold replied, staring up at the stars between buildings. We did. You gave me a second. Mike? Tom smiled. Do you feel different? Harold shrugged. Lighter. Like my shadow finally stopped following me. They paused outside the studio. A young black boy walked up, about 10 years old, clutching a copy of a math workbook in his hands. He looked at Harold with wide, reverent eyes. Are you the puzzle guy from TV? Harold smiled gently. I might be. Can you teach me? Harold bent down, met the boy's gaze, and said, Only if you promise to outsmart me someday. I will. The boy beamed. Tom watched the two of them under the street lamp, one mind finally seen, the other just beginning. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a legacy. The invitations came one after another, like spring buds blooming from a once frozen branch. It started with a letter embossed with the gold seal of Columbia University. Tom had opened it first, his hands trembling, before quietly sliding it across the table to Harold. Inside was a formal offer. It is with both pride and regret that we, the trustees and faculty of Columbia University, extend to Dr. Harold Elijah Brown an honorary doctorate of science and mathematics, and offer a posthumous reinstatement of academic record and legacy. There were no conditions, no bureaucratic hurdles, only a line that said, This should have happened in 1965. We are deeply sorry it didn't. Harold read the letter slowly, silently, his eyes scanning every word like a code he already knew. When he finished, he folded it gently, placed it in his lap, and whispered, Took them long enough. That was only the beginning. A week later, an aide from Congressman Samuel Delaney's office reached out. The House Subcommittee on Civil Rights was opening hearings to investigate historical academic discrimination, specifically during the Jim Crow era, and they wanted Harold to testify. Harold didn't hesitate. He showed up in Washington wearing a crisp gray suit and a blue tie Tom had given him the night before. His steps were slower now, but there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. The same fire that once intimidated professors on live television. When he entered the chamber, all the murmuring stopped. It was standing room only. The gallery overflowed with students, professors, journalists, activists, many of them black. Many of them silent witnesses to histories that had mirrored Harold's in lesser-known ways. Tom sat in the back, watching, notebook open but untouched. Harold approached the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and began. I was 17 when I realized the country I loved had no room for me in its definition of brilliance. He spoke slowly, deliberately. Each sentence was a strike against history's erasure. I was told I was too young to be that smart, too poor, too urban, too black. But no one said those words out loud. They didn't have to. They showed it. In how they silenced me. In how they burned my letters without reading them. In how they edited me out of their footage and their future. There was no anger in his voice, only clarity. Intelligence, he said, has no color, but the silence of justice? That's always had a shade. A beat of silence followed. Then, thunderous applause erupted. Harold received a bipartisan standing ovation. Even the most stoic members of Congress rose to their feet. In the weeks that followed, a flurry of bills were proposed, some symbolic, some substantive. Universities launched internal reviews. Forgotten students and researchers began coming forward. Names were restored to archives. Apologies were made in public. For many, Harold's testimony was a spark. For Tom, it was closure. He was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Journalism, a gold medallion engraved with his name, though he insisted on sharing credit with Harold in every interview. When asked what inspired the story, Tom always answered the same way, a man on a bench with a pencil and a memory sharper than history itself. But Harold didn't care for interviews, or ceremonies, or honorary dinners. He cared for Tuesdays. By summer's end, Harold had returned to his usual spot in the park, same bench, same paper. The New York Times rested in his lap, half completed, not because he couldn't finish it, he just enjoyed the process more now. That day, 5 kids from the neighborhood spotted him and ran over. "Grandpa Harold, can we do puzzles today?" One of them shouted. Harold looked up from the paper and smiled. "You bring your pencils?" They nodded in unison. "Then come on," he said, shifting to make room. "Today we're doing logic grids and a little modular arithmetic." "Aw man, the hard stuff?" One boy groaned. Harold chuckled. "Smart stuff. You'll thank me when you outscore your teachers." They sat around him, legs crossed, notebooks open. As he guided them through patterns, primes, and problems, more joined some parents, some joggers who recognized him, even a few curious. Tourists who'd seen the video but never imagined he was real. Tom stood at a distance, watching with quiet satisfaction. He didn't bring his notebook this time. Just coffee. He knew the story was over. Or maybe it had just begun again. Harold wasn't famous in the way the world once denied him. He was something more enduring. He was remembered, and on that bench in the sun, with laughter around him and a half-solved crossword in his hand, he looked freer than any metal or microphone could ever make him. He looked complete. The end. Thank you for listening. May we never stay silent when the truth deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep asking the questions that matter.